Whole Hog Sports presents the basketball podcast of Mid-America, the premier Arkansas Hoops podcast, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Here's your host, Whole Hog Sports basketball analyst Scotty Bordelon.
Welcome into the basketball podcast of Mid-America. It is April 6th, and Arkansas is heavy into roster building mode for the 2023-2024 season. We appreciate you listening in today. I'm Scotty Bordelon of Whole Hog Sports, and I'm happy to be joined, per usual, by Andrew Joseph of Whole Hog Sports and Bob Holt of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. And we also have a special guest and a new member of the Whole Hog Sports and Hogs Illustrated team, Ethan Westerman. Before we get into what's been going on with Arkansas, I guess since the season ended in Vegas in the Sweet 16 to UConn, who went on to, I think they wound up boat racing everybody in the tournament. It wasn't, I think after Arkansas lost to UConn, it was, at least in my eyes and probably Bob's and even Curtis Wilkerson, who I sat next to during all of the tournament games that we traveled to, UConn was just overwhelming, and it wasn't a shock at all that they just kind of, cruised through the tournament. Before we get into kind of the roster movement and whatnot, Ethan, I'm going to be the teacher that nobody likes on the first day of school and make you stand up and introduce yourself, and I guess just kind of tell the people, about yourself and what your role with us is going to be.
So like you said, Ethan Westerman, I'm a double grad of the University of Arkansas. I graduated
Humble brag over here.
Well, yeah, I wish I'd have just done one because, it was a lot of extra work and then you end up just doing one of the two. So, but yeah, I graduated May 2022 with a degree in journalism from Fulbright College, and then graduated in the fall. So December 2022 from the Walton College with a marketing degree. So I started freelancing for the Democrat-Gazette as a junior in college. Funny thing, I just wrote a story in a class one time that I didn't think anything of. I just was trying to, get a good grade on my assignment. Turns out my professor sent it in to Chip Souza, who editor at the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and about 3 days later it was in the paper, and I was getting asked to cover high school girls soccer games. So that was my first ever assignment, was sitting up in a Bentonville High School girls soccer game. And then just slowly Chip started kind of throwing more stuff my way, and kind of led to last year picking up some Arkansas softball coverage. I really enjoyed that. Whenever you're doing college instead of high school, doing stats and stuff like that, it's a little bit easier.
No doubt.
So I was able to kind of run with that a little bit, kind of make it a little bit of what I wanted. And then just over time, kind of started getting thrown even more and more. So that developed into this past year covering the Arkansas women's basketball team, their season. Talk about a dominant team that I was surprised didn't run through their tournament with South Carolina, but that's aside from the point. And then I also covered at home football games. I did visiting locker room reports. So I was interviewing, there was a stud lineup of visiting coaches that came to Razorback Stadium this year. So I was like, what a first time to ever do football coverage. To have Nick Saban in town. Even on the off, your non-conference game, it was Bobby Petrino. So I was like, all right, I guess it's just that type of lineup. But anyways, yeah, so that's a lot of what I've been doing. Moving forward, going to keep on covering a lot of these women's sports on campus. They have a lot of good teams right now, so I'm excited for, to see how they do and cover some of those programs. And of course, right now, softball is in full swing, no pun intended. So covering that, yeah, I'm looking forward to, continue doing things like this and, joining forces with you guys.
Yeah, man, we're super excited to have you, buddy. And you've been doing really good work for the newspaper, and pretty much everything that you've been writing, the last year plus, I guess, has been coming on our site too. So I think there's some familiarity already with some readers, but pumped to have you, man. And we're definitely going to have you on. It's good. I think it's good to have your voice too, because you're like, you covered all the Arkansas women's basketball games, and I don't think we really talked much about the women's basketball team on this podcast, in the last couple years. We'll kind of touch on some different things, but it'll be good to have that voice too. Um, I guess we'll start with some news from last night. The latest news with Arkansas's roster. I think it was around 7:30 or 8 o'clock. I was at dinner with some buddies, and Jalen Graham announced on Twitter that he's going to run it back with Arkansas for a second season. I'm going to admit that I was a little bit caught by surprise by this. I mean, I think just based on the usage and minutes played, I thought he was a prime transfer candidate. And I I'm going to be real honest. I had his transfer story ready, so I had to do a little bit of tweaking when he announced that he was coming back. Um, just read off some of the numbers for him. He played 31 games last year, averaged 9.4 minutes, 5 points, 2.3 boards. Played 10 or fewer minutes in 19 games last year, including the last 7. I remember I talked to him in the locker room the day before the UConn game, and he was really excited about the game because it was the first time this season that he was going to have family in attendance to watch him. Vegas and Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's about 5 or 6 hours, between those two cities. So he had a lot of family, friends, kind of his support system was there. So they got to see him play a little bit. He shot 65.5% from the field, which is really good, but it wasn't like, Jalen was kind of a shots in bulk type of guy. Whenever he got into the game, he was trying to score now. Like he's pretty wired that way. Um, Free throw line was a struggle, I would say, sub 40%. That's not great. But he had 7 points, 5 boards, a steal, and a block in Arkansas's 3 NCAA tournament games. I guess just reaction from you guys on this. I mean, I already said I was kind of surprised, but how do you see him maybe fitting in to what we know about the roster right now for next season?
Yeah, I'm like you. I was definitely surprised he came back. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing for Arkansas to get an older guy back. So many of these transfers come in, they play 1 year, and then they're gone, and that's understandable. They want to get on and move on with their, have a shot to play pro ball, whatever level that might be. But Jalen, he was a really good offensive player, and I know a lot of fans got frustrated why he didn't play more. But if he's going in and scoring a basket and giving up 2, that's not good. And you got to play defense at a high level to play consistent minutes for Eric Musselman. And so I think, and he had good rebounding games, but again, it wasn't consistent. So I think to get consistent minutes, he's got to, keep scoring like he has been, improve defensively, be more committed. He's obviously got the size and the skill set, I think, to be a good interior defender, block some shots, alter shots, and rebound better. And they must have had those kind of conversations between he and the coaching staff, or else he wouldn't be coming back. They wouldn't want him back. But I think it's great that you'll have a big guy, a fifth-year guy, mature guy that's going to have his second year in this system. And he's going to be, if you thought he was motivated last season or this past season, just imagine what it'll be like as a fifth-year guy. So, and he wouldn't be back. I don't think he'd be coming back if he wasn't totally bought in. So I think it's a good thing for him and for Arkansas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys touched on it a little bit. Obviously, his offensive talent is good enough to play anywhere in the country, but it's kind of negated by his liability on the defensive end. And I think it's not often you get a guy who transferred from a Power 5 school where he was, I think, all Pac-12 honorable mention or something like that, and played 25 minutes a game there, comes to Arkansas, plays 9, and decides to stay. And so obviously I think there was a conversation where if he had a conversation with Eric Musselman that if he's going to play at Arkansas, he's got to get better on the defensive end. And I think the potential for him to do that is there. I think he's got the length, he's got the athleticism. I think he probably needs to add weight, get stronger, and just become more active. And I think it could really be beneficial for Arkansas if he figures things out on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think Jalen's got a good body, good frame, like you mentioned, his length is solid. It's really solid, which I think is part of the reason why Eric was kind of frustrated at times this year with what he showed defensively, and then on the defensive glass, he can go get offensive boards. I think it's just like he's just wired to score, and so he's also kind of by association he's going to go after missed shots, maybe a little bit more than misses from the opponent. But I remember games like Baylor. I mean, he was great on the glass. I think he ended up with 7 or 9 boards that game. He was the guy that ended up coming in to talk to us Bob, if you remember that following the game, just because, he was kind of one of the bright spots that day, gave him a really big lift off the bench. Um, and I was looking at CBB analytics last night, and I threw this into my story late. I think it was after I published it, so I went back in and added this. That website shows that he was 42 of 48 shooting at the rim last year, which is you're gonna take that. But he was 27 of 49, which is 55% on all other attempts in the lane. I think I'll throw it to y'all to see what kind of the next steps are for him. I think offensively, he's just got to grow his game a little bit more, like beyond the lane. He made like 5 shots outside the lane last year, and so he catches the ball at like the elbows or the free throw line or the short corners or something like that. Like people know that he's going to try to get, into his bag of tricks around the rim, and they don't really have to respect him from 10, 15 feet out, because I would imagine he's on the scouting report somewhere and they see his free throw percentage and they're like, we're going to take our chances with this. So I think he's got to add, at least the serviceable jumper. I think that would be a great addition for him. I think he took like 3 threes last year, didn't make one. So I think the jumper aspect of his game needs to come along. And if you stick with the offensive side too, like he's got to he's got to tone the turnovers down like big time. I looked, he was ninth on the team in minutes, but he was fifth in turnovers. And Mekhi Mitchell played 723 minutes last year, had 33 turnovers. Jalen had 35 turnovers in 291 minutes. So I think his decision making with the ball has got to be better. And then defensively, I think just it's individual defense. Like you got to become a better one-on-one player, I think, if you want to stick on the floor with Eric. And then I think the defensive rebounding, that's really got to improve, because he showed some, I think, signs of life, at least for like maybe a 4 or 5 game stretch this year where he was blocking, a shot or two, maybe 3 in some games. Just what are y'all's thoughts on maybe what can, take Jalen's game to the next level?
Yeah, I agree. I forgot about all his turnovers, but that's something. And maybe if he just, better focus, better concentration, just be stronger with the ball, and maybe, make a decision faster. I'm either going to pass it out or I'm going to take it to the hole. And you're right. If he could develop, he doesn't need to be, Steph Curry, but if he could keep him honest out there where he gets the ball, 10, 12 feet out, and they might have to come up on him, instead of laying back and protecting the lane. I mean, free throws, I feel like a big guy like that is going to get fouled a lot if he plays more minutes, and he's got to be able to shoot, 60%. Don't have to shoot 75, but he obviously can't shoot 40. Well, he can, but that wouldn't be good.
I think you got to improve it at least to a split on average, the line right. Like that would probably be pretty beneficial. Moving on from Jalen, I think the biggest news to date, roster wise, this offseason was Trevor Brazile announcing late last week that he was going to come back. He put a post on his social media accounts, kind of like Jalen did. I think there was some thought that Trevin might at least try out the draft process, because he did. I mean, he made a name for himself early in the year, and I think that dunk of the year, I think hands down dunk of the year. Like I've never seen a dunk like that in person. I mean, we talked about it a long time ago, but the coil back on the dunk, he sent that kid to the core of the earth. But he really made a name for himself, I think, on Maui too. He played really, really well. Obviously a guy that, I talked to Eric last week. I shot him a text and was like, hey, do you have a comment that you could pass along? And like 30 seconds later, he's calling me. He is ecstatic about TB coming back. He says, they're going to try to build a lot of what they do offensively around him, which I think we can all agree, so long as he's healthy, that's probably a pretty good idea. He said that TB is one of the more talented, unique players in the college game. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with him. I guess what intrigues y'all most about just the potential of TB? I don't want to maybe say that he's going to be like the cornerstone of what they do, but I think he is a huge foundational piece, at least in that front court. Maybe a guy that obviously you're going to run a lot of things through next season. And then, that's just on the offensive end defensively. And I think he had a pretty solid block rate when he was on the floor last year.
Yeah, like you say, or Eric says, such a unique player. Can shoot perimeter. To me, he's Daniel Gaffer with a jump shot. So he can run the floor like Daniel, he can rebound like Daniel, he can block shots like Daniel, but he's a good jump shooter. I think he shot around, I know it was a small sample size, but I think he shot around 38% on threes. And you can tell he's really motivated. It seems to be ahead of schedule on this rehab. And so hopefully he can be ready to go, when the season opens in November or shortly after that, and be in a good spot. But yeah, I don't doubt an NBA team would have taken a chance on a guy coming off an ACL. But I think, if he comes back and has the kind of season we think he will, he'll be a high first round pick and he'll make a lot of money.
I'd agree.
Yeah. And so I think he's making a good call. And you really saw at the end of his freshman year at Missouri, he really played well in the SEC tournament. Then he was playing great for Arkansas. I mean, watching San Diego State in the Final Four, I remember thinking how well Trevin played against those guys in Maui. You mentioned Maui. So I think he just got an incredibly high upside. And I think, hopefully he gets back healthy and stays healthy. And I think if he does, he'll be one of the most exciting players in the country.
Before I forget, last week, Ethan, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this. Arkansas's women's basketball team, I think, at least from your perspective and maybe Mike Neighbors' perspective, got caught maybe a little bit by surprise. Aaron Barnum decided to go into the transfer portal. You got anything on that? Kind of maybe the kind of season that she had?
Yeah, I think it definitely did shock most people because, I mean, she didn't participate in senior day this year because her and Michaela Daniels, the other senior who had that extra COVID year, were both like, yeah, there's no need to right now because we're going to be doing it next year. So, but her minutes did kind of start to dwindle a little bit more toward the end of the year. She just wasn't looking as about mid-season. She was really confident, and she was an all SEC second team selection because of how good of a really that middle part of the season was for her. She scored 37 on Ole Miss. Made like 3 threes that game as a forward. So I think just towards the end of the year, I don't know if it's a writing on the wall type of deal with a talented incoming class, and really what kind of killed them this year was not having a true big. So I don't know if just kind of saw the writing on the wall that maybe minutes would be down again next year, but I think it did, like you said, definitely did kind of catch some people off guard just because you expected her back for that COVID year after she was the longest tenured player on the team because she actually redshirted her freshman year in 2018-19 whenever they made that SEC championship game run. So yeah, definitely surprising news there. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Neighbors, he's very he's done it before with Slocum and Dungy in the past, going in the portal some with Sasha Goforth too. But he's really big on just keeping his guys and trying to develop them. But I wouldn't be surprised. It's kind of an imminent need now that they're going to probably need to go out and find a big.
The Basketball Podcast of Mid-America is brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Visit their showroom at 411 South Metro Parkway in Rogers or online at landerstoyotanwa.com. On the other side of a short break, we'll get into the first transfer portal edition for the Arkansas men's basketball team this offseason, and play some audio from a conversation that I had with Percy Allen. He covers Washington Huskies basketball for the Seattle Times. I talked to him a couple of nights ago. I think it was Tuesday night. He gave some really good insight, I thought, on Keon Minifield, a 6'1", 150, 160-pound guard, just depending on whatever site that you look at, from Washington. So I think he's going to bring some pop and maybe some flair to Arkansas's backcourt next season. So stick with us for that.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
All right, I wanted to start this segment by checking to see if any of you guys have been contacted by Arkansas out of the portal yet. Anybody? Show of hands. I feel like Arkansas's contact. Andrew, I see your hand up. Arkansas's contacted a lot of guys, but to this point, it's Keon Minifield, and I think you're really going to learn a lot about Keon Minifield in this interview with Percy Allen. He was kind enough to take some time out of his night to talk with me about him. I emailed Percy. I found his email as he wrote the transfer story, from the Washington side of things, at the Seattle Times. I found his email, sent him an email, and he got back with me pretty quick and told me to call him. He was putting a desk together, but he was still kind enough to kind of give me a rundown on Keon. Really, really liked the kid. Said there's a lot of hair, and because he's a pretty thin kid, there's a lot of bones, but there's, he's gonna play with some flair. Really good kid, can kind of get you into your sets offensively. Really good ball handler, tough to take it from him, but I'll just kind of let you guys listen to what we got from Percy. But before that, have any of you guys kind of looked into him, or maybe what intrigues you about this first edition?
I've just read your fine story.
Oh, thanks, Bob. That's a nice plug. Yeah, you can go to Whole Hog right now and find the analysis I wrote on Minifield late Tuesday. That story's got a lot in it of what you'll hear from Percy Allen, but I also, went to CBB Analytics and found some, pretty intriguing numbers, I thought, in terms of what he'll bring to the table, or at least what he did in his one season at UW. So shout out to CBB Analytics, by the way, helping me get a little bit of a better grasp on some of these guys that, are potential commits. And then, even during the season, that's a site that I like to look at a lot. So all right, without further ado, we'll throw it to the interview with Percy Allen, who covers Washington basketball of the Seattle Times.
He's a good kid. Really good kid. He's a fun kid, plays with a lot of flair. So what type of kid is he? Yeah, he's a fantastic kid. Just one, I can talk to him just about, like, as a person, obviously he was just here for the 1 year, but got to know him a bit, because anytime that you're just a standout player, that's kind of just what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like all this stuff sounds like a cliche, but just a joy to be around, like those types of things, a sponge. He just, kind of showed up. And he was this, like, skinny kid. Skinny. I mean, it's a lot of hair and a lot of bones. But just really good with the ball. You, can't get it from him. And, you could tell early on in, the summer practices that, I mean, there might be something here, right? Like, you never really know. But it was like, all right, there might be something here. And then when you, listen to, the old heads kind of talk about him, and they, really liked him. And so he got his chance early, early in the season. And his first start, he showed everything. I mean, he didn't flinch. And his second start didn't flinch. And then just being a freshman, things kind of caught up with him. And maybe he got on the scouting report and didn't put up the big 20-point games. And went back to the bench, and that affected him some. But sure enough, kind of stuck with it. Washington just really needed somebody who can not turn the ball over. I mean, that was really it. They just needed somebody who can, who can just kind of initiate offense. And he was able to, perform that role. I don't have it in front of me. Averaged 3.1 assists. Turnovers weren't too bad. But more than anything, was just able to, get them into their offense. And every now and then he could go off, right? I mean, like, he was still, a freshman learning the way, but every now and then he could, like, go off offensively. He was on the Pac-12 all freshman team. And so you would like to think that he'll get better. I mean, obviously with the Huskies, they were hoping that like he would stay because they saw a big, bright future for him. Arkansas much better than I do. I know Eric Musselman a bit from his time in the Pac-12. So, I think he knows how to use guards. The one thing with, sort of Keon, as he goes forward, look, that weight thing is an issue. I mean, he's listed at 150. Mm-hmm. He might be 160. He was hoping to get to like 175, by next year. That weight thing is a serious deal there, and by that, just, bigger guys can just back him down. He just hasn't shown yet to be much of a rebounder. And so that's a deal there. And I think defensively, not going to say he's a liability, but he's going to have to figure that end out too, right? I think he's a solid on-ball defender, but he's going to have to get better, like a lot of freshmen will. So, but the one thing that he can do, though, is that you're not going to take the ball away from him. He can get to any spot he wants on the floor. He's very quick dribble, quick first step, quick shot. The three-pointer is going to need some work, but he can get into the lane. And I would like to see him take more fouls, but that's easy for me to say because I don't have to take those hits. With Washington, it's a very pedestrian type of an offense, Right. Not a whole lot of schemes to it, not a whole lot of complexity to it. It's not layered in like that regard. It is basically your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn type of a deal. Lots of dribble drives, lots of ISOs. So they don't necessarily work in concert with each other all the time. And so within all of that, he was able to, again, like you can see his stats, like what he had at least 6 nights when like he scored over 20. And so the kid has the ability to just go off. I mean, just when he's feeling it, he can get into the lane and get pull-ups. And he's got a nice floater game, which I think is a lot of these kids don't use enough nowadays, but a nice floater game that can get over, get that mid-range shot over taller defenders. But he's young. And I'm sure he'll add some more things to, his bag of tricks. Where he would struggle is like if you did press him, in that regard. But at the same time, though, as I said earlier, just running an offense, running a set, he's really good at that. He's just a really good ball handler in the half court offense, and he'll get you into your sets. Schemes to it, not a whole lot of complexity to it. It's not layered in like that regard. It is basically your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn type of a deal. Lots of dribble drives, lots of ISOs. So they don't necessarily work in concert with each other all the time. And so within all of that, he was able to, again, like you can see his stats, like what he had at least 6 nights when he scored over 20. And so the kid has the ability to just go off. I mean, just when he's feeling it, he can get into the lane and get pull-ups. and he's got a nice floater game, which I think is a lot of these kids don't use enough nowadays, but a nice floater game that can get over, get that mid-range shot over taller defenders. But he's young, and I'm sure he'll add some more things to, his bag of tricks. Where he would struggle is like if you did press him, in that regard. But at the same time, though, as I said earlier, just running an offense, running a set, he's really good at that. He's just a really good ball handler in the half court offense, and he'll get you into your sets.
Some other news that's come out in the last week or so. Bob, I remember we were in Vegas and we were in the locker room. You were talking to Nick as you were writing kind of your advance, your preview on the UConn game. I think it was just about, might be your last time to get to write about Nick, right? So you were over there kind of talking to him about his future, and then I think he kind of came back at you, was like, how do you know I'm going to go pro? Well, he did declare. He was actually the first Arkansas. Yeah. I guess there's your writing on the wall. But Nick was the first Razorback to declare for the draft. Wasn't a surprise in the least. I guess some other news, Ricky Council, he's going all in on the draft too. I think that's probably a pretty good decision for Ricky. When I wrote his declares for the draft story, I looked at several different mock drafts, 4 or 5 different sites, and it's pretty consensus that he's a second round guy. How do y'all think that Ricky helped himself this season? Because I remember, even throughout the whole season, even when Arkansas was struggling, Ricky would say, this has been kind of a special year for him, and I think he helped himself out a lot, maybe doubled his scoring average from his last year at Wichita State. And I think one of the things that he said, and maybe that note that he posted when he declared for the draft, was like, it's kind of crazy the difference 1 year can make.
Yeah, I think and Wichita is obviously a good program. They're not where they were before Greg Marshall, Greg Marshall's fall from grace, but they were a team that got to a program that got to a Final Four and was a number 1 seed and all that. But I think just Ricky, you look at, like he had a big game against Kansas. He had a big game at Baylor. He scored well against Oklahoma. He played pretty well in the SEC. So, the AAC, all due respect, is not the SEC. And Arkansas also played a really tough non-conference schedule. So I think he was able to put his skill set out there against, I think Arkansas played 20 NCAA tournament. They played 20 games against NCAA tournament teams. So, and Ricky had a lot of good games, and he obviously showed off his athleticism, the dunks, really good free throw shoot, clutch free throw. I think he had 29 or 32 free throws in the NCAA tournament, and he closed out the Kansas game for him, obviously, and that was impressive. He showed he could be a playmaker. He played some point guard at times when they needed it, and he can rebound. He's got that good length for defense. So I just think if you draft Ricky Council, you're getting a heck of an athlete and a guy, just who can do a lot of different things. He's got to improve his perimeter shot probably, but I think he can do that. I don't think you can question his work ethic. I'm sure Eric and the coaching staff would give him high recommendations. So I agree with you. I think he's making a good call, because I don't know if his stock will be higher than it is right now.
Yeah, you got anything, Andrew? I guess just like what maybe intrigued you about Ricky's season? The jumper, I think, is probably still, that's something that I think a lot of teams are probably thinking that, if we get this guy, we could probably, work with him at it. The mid-range jumper wasn't really his specialty. Like, he could hit some really tough jumpers, really good at the free throw line. I thought especially in the tournament, like he was almost automatic at the line. That 3-point shot's it's something about the hand placement on the ball, just the way it looks coming off his hands probably needs a little bit of work, but I think there's a lot to like with this guy, especially athletically, in the eyes, I guess, of some pro teams.
Yeah, I think when you look at Ricky Council, he just oozes athleticism, and he might be a project, but I think if you get him into the right franchise in the right spot where you can develop him properly, he could really be a hit for a team that takes a chance on him in a second round pick, just because we mentioned before his elite athleticism, and he does have potential to be he's a tough shot maker, but his shot it's funky. It doesn't look smooth, but sometimes it goes in at a decent enough clip that there's potential there that if you can improve that, maybe his form or something in the mechanics there, where he becomes a average to above average shot taker, then there's definitely a pro potential in his future.
I really enjoyed talking to Ricky during that NCAA tournament run, and that's maybe what I enjoyed most about it. Just going to Des Moines and Vegas, the locker rooms were open, and I remember, I think it was the day before the UConn game. Ricky's just kind of sitting on a folding table where there's some snacks over there that I won't say whether or not I took some from that table, but he was just super confident. He looked like he was in his element. Um, I don't know. He seemed like from the beginning of the season, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought he was going to be more maybe of a defensive stopper than a scorer. But then, you throw some big time injuries in the way, and his role kind of changed. And especially when Nick went down, like he really had to assume a really big scoring role. And I thought he did that pretty well. Like the efficiency suffered sometimes, I think, just because he felt the need to, give the team a lift with his scoring. But Ricky was great. I thought he was transparent with us a lot of times. I remember during maybe or after maybe the Georgia game, he told us that, he was playing for, playing with a heavy heart because one of his friends passed away. And then it was really cool talking to him too. If you remember late in that Kansas game, Arkansas's down 2 with like a minute and a half left, and he hits that really tough turnaround jumper to tie the game. And I remember talking to him just about that play, and the locker rooms being open is so good for this kind of stuff because he said normally he's more comfortable doing that move going to his left, but he said he kind of surprised himself a little bit. But he said he went right, turned around. I think can't remember which shoulder he turned over, but it was a really, really impressive shot. But Bob, what are you going to kind of take away from Ricky's year here? I thought he was largely pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love talking to Ricky. Just a very mature guy, a junior, but he talked like a guy who was 26 or 27 or something. And you're right, the locker rooms being open are great. Of course, I'm so old, locker rooms were open all the time when I
Yeah, I
came
guess it was
up.
weird a couple years ago when they weren't open.
Yeah, well, but that was, yeah, you get so much better stuff. I remember, yeah, you talking to Nick the day before the UConn game, kind of doing a story about how he'd been struggling offensively. And I remember Ricky had the clincher quote for me anyway. He said, just let the kid hoop, like he's under a lot of pressure, you know, just let the kid hoop. I thought, wow, that was great. I don't know if you get that in a press conference setting. Some guys are really good in the press conferences. Also, it doesn't go out on video everywhere. There was a group of 3 or 4 of us talking to him, but yeah, I really like Ricky. I thought he was a great pickup. I think he was even better than people expected. Obviously, a good player at Wichita. He made the transformation from being a sixth man to a starter. He came off the bench a few games, but he played 34 minutes a game. I mean, he was playing heavy duty minutes in one of the best conferences in the country against one of the best schedules in the country. And so I thought he had a great year. I know he probably could have, like we say, he could have hit more jump shots, whatever. Had a couple games where he struggled, but to me, he was really, really consistent, especially when Nick went down and Trevor went down. Ricky picked up a heavy load, and I just thought he was a great pickup for Arkansas.
I think he's going to wind up being an example that Arkansas's coaching staff can use for these transfers from schools that come from a conference like the American. Like you could come here and, if you do what we say and you follow this development plan, we're going to give you freedom. And, as long as you can, do X, Y, and Z, we're going to make you, into a player that, some of these pro teams are going to like, and, at least, lift their pro prospects. Speaking of that, Devo declared for the NBA draft late Friday night. I think it was like almost, I think it was maybe a quarter till 10. I'd been waiting on it all year. I was about to shut my eyes. I was in the recliner watching TV, and then I got the notification that he declared. He's maintaining his college eligibility. So I think it's interesting. I kind of expect him to be back just because I don't see him on the mock drafts and things like that. But I think that Kansas game, man, I think that got him at least on a few people's radar. I remember Jonathan Givony from ESPN put out a tweet about him, just the shot creation and the defensive rebounding, and then, you know, just kind of the pace and the kind of the herky jerky style that he plays with. It's kind of intriguing for sure. We'll obviously eventually see what he winds up doing, but yeah, Devo declared, and then I think obviously kind of the same vein as Nick Smith, AB hasn't declared yet. Anthony Black has not put anything out yet, but I think there is a less than 0% chance that he comes back. There's just I don't think there's any reason for him to. And then I guess the last one that we're maybe waiting on is Jordan Walsh, right? Like he came in preseason, you know, he was probably a projected late first round, early second round guy. Season didn't probably go exactly how he maybe expected it to, but he had some low moments, but I think there were some moments in the NCAA tournament and then, you know, in some of Arkansas's bigger wins where he really showed the value that he has. I remember after the UConn game, I was like, did you learn anything about yourself throughout this whole season? And he was like, I guess if you're basketball minded, you know, you can kind of see that, you know, I'm not going to score 15, 20, 30 points a game, but my plus minus is going to be really good. I'm going to help a team win. I think he'll be a guy that tests the draft waters. Maybe if I had to guess, I would say that he comes back. If he comes back, Devo comes back, and they add maybe, you know, a couple guys from the portal, I think Arkansas's got a chance to be pretty solid next season, no doubt about it. Want to thank you guys again for listening in today. I think the plan is to probably keep recording during the offseason, kind of on an as needed basis, and, you know, when big moves roster wise happen. Really intrigued to see how Eric and his coaching staff keep building this roster. I think their success in the portal the last few off seasons got people really excited to just see what the makeup of next year's roster is going to look like. But yeah, we'll come back, you know, going to shoot for next week. We'll see if something happens. I would imagine something happens between now and next week. So again, thank you guys for listening. For Andrew Joseph and Ethan Westerman and Bob Holt, I'm Scotty Borderline, and we'll holler at you next time on the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.